Bird feathers can be complicated and tricky. So how do I manage to go from this to this in about 1 hour? Well, let's find out. The colors that I'm using today are a Mars Black, Payne's Gray, Burnt Umber, and Titanium White. Well, those are my palette. The colors I actually end up using are just Titanium White and Payne's Gray. So I'm starting off by mixing some Titanium White with Payne's Gray, and I'm using a very stiff bristled brush. Now, while I mess around mixing that together, I just want to, chat a little. So a lot of artists tend to struggle with intricate details like the tiny little barbs on the feathers of a bird, and you know what? I am no exception. Well, I'm a self-taught artist, and as I started this painting session, I had no clue how I was going to pull this off. And some things just kind of happen by surprise. So this isn't really a teacher to student type tutorial. This is more like an art experiment. This is me trying to figure things out as I go and sharing the process with you. I believe that we all struggle with our art from time to time, and that it's okay to go into a painting not knowing how the heck you're going to pull it off. Sometimes beauty unfolds on its own. Just because you decided you were going to show up and you're going to put your skills to the test. Now, before I get lost in being poetic and floaty, I do need to tell you that it is really important that you start off with a solid foundation and lay down your basics first before you jump into little details. So if you'd like to know how to do that, I'd highly suggest you watch my videos about the grid and sketch method, as well as my video about how to block in and why. I'll link those in the description for you. So what am I doing here? Well, I felt there were still a lot of open areas that needed some texture before I could go in with the details. So I grabbed this stiff brush, and the reason for that is because it is great at being a bit messy. Sometimes messy is good, especially if you don't want crisp or hard lines. So I tried to fluff things up a little, but without putting in small details. And the top of the head also looked a little rough, so I just, wanted to smooth things out as well over there. Now, as you look at the colors behind the beak and the ear, once my hand is out of the way, you'll see that there is a lot of gray and brownish tones on the canvas. And I just wanted to reel that in a little bit and give a more feathery look. Well, again, having a good solid base to start from will help you in the long run, so you won't have to go back and potentially fix mistakes. But, as mentioned earlier, I am also just discovering as I go here, so there isn't always a rhyme or reason behind what I do. It's a journey, and I hope you enjoy coming along for it. This brush is old and splayed and well loved, so it's perfect for this job. Don't throw out your old ratty looking brushes. They can be used for all kinds of cool projects, and they might even speed up your painting process. It's amazing what a splayed brush can accomplish that might have taken twice as long if you were trying to create a certain texture with a brand new brush. So hold on to those well-loved brushes. Now I'm going to fast forward to the part where I start using my smaller brushes and get into the details, because that's why you came here, I assume. So to figure out how I painted those feathers and how you can do it for yourself. Or you're just here to watch me paint as it's relaxing and soothing. It's all good. Whatever reason you came here for, I am so grateful that you're here. Well, I hope that you've noticed that I've only used one color so far. Sometimes it's just better to keep things simple and not to overcomplicate it for yourself. Plus, this way you do prevent a very busy looking painting. Can you imagine if I'd keep changing colors and sticking them on the canvas? It'll be so confusing. So yes, less is more. Now, time to go in with my teeny weeny brush. Now this is a nail brush actually. I got it off of Amazon and I use them a lot, in almost all of my paintings. And if you're interested in purchasing some for yourself, there is an affiliate link in the description, so go and check that out. Well, I am again mixing titanium white with Payne's gray, as the other paint had dried out and I used most of it, so. But I do suggest using a different brush for mixing, as this one is so small and it doesn't move a whole lot of paint around, so I made a mistake here. Grab a bigger brush to mix your next color, and when it's all mixed, go in with your small liner brush. Okay, so I skipped to where I was done mixing, and now it's really a matter of trial and error with my brush strokes. I'm just figuring out which way the little barbs go and how much pressure to put on my brush, and also whether my paint is the right consistency. I am trying to follow my reference photo as closely as possible. Speaking of which, let's pop that up for you so you can see what I'm working on. In the photo, you can see all the small little lines that overlap each other going different directions, which is what makes this a bit challenging to tackle. I know that when I look at it as a whole, it is almost psychedelic with all those barbs going in all kinds of directions possible, so I just am messing about and trying to find my way in how to approach this. Well, good thing is that acrylics are quite forgiving, so mistakes can be fixed rather easily. As the top of the head didn't have a lot of very distinct details, I just tried to put in the strokes where I felt they needed to be to make it look more like actual feathers. Now this process I will speed up a bit, so you're not here forever and a day. As I started to move towards the feathers behind the eye, I noticed that I had to approach it a bit different, as, you know, those feathers are going in all kinds of directions. You'll see as I work on this section that some tend to come diagonally downwards, whilst others go diagonally upwards. And to make it a bit more tricky, there's a ton of overlapping and little tiny feather barbs in between. I guess I didn't really notice that when I initially picked the reference photo. I just saved it because it was such a powerful image, and I had not really looked at the details at that point, so I just went ahead and messed around and just kept fiddling until it started to look somewhat decent. I don't always have a cookie cutter explanation as to why I do things. Sometimes you just do and don't think too much. And you know, that's good. That's very good, because I do tend to be a person to overanalyze and overthink. So for me to be able to just paint, create, and not worry too much or think too much, it's a breath of fresh air. Geez, I should do that more often, I think. But to get back to some painting advice and tips, make sure you get your paint consistency right for these small little strokes. If your paint is too thick, you won't be able to get a nice steady stroke that flows. You will run out of paint before your stroke is supposed to be done, and if the paint just abruptly stops, you have to go back and finish that stroke, which I personally find a pain in the butt, as I don't always get it exactly the same way, especially with small little strokes like these feather barbs or whiskers for that matter. So I try to get enough paint to water ratio to make it work for the strokes that I'm going for. Too much water is a problem, as your paint will be more translucent, so more see-through, and you might not even really see your stroke on the canvas once it dries, because the paint is just simply too diluted. And another issue with that can be paint dripping down your canvas, which is an issue if the paint under that stroke might not be dry, and now you've got some fixing to do. So mess around until you get the consistency just right. Now, how do you know? Well, what I tend to do is a tiny little swatch stroke on the side of my canvas, on the masking tape, just to see how it flows. Now, if it flows well on there, I'll just take that straight to my canvas. Time to speed this part up as well. It is really all rinse and repeat at this point, and I'm just hoping that it'll look decent in the end. But at this stage, I was gaining some confidence as my feathers started to look more realistic, at least in my opinion. Well, you notice that I'm coming in behind my strokes with a dry mop brush, literally mopping up tiny little messes. Well, sometimes I hit the canvas too hard with my strokes, and the harshness is easily softened with just a dab of that mop brush. So if you have one, keep it on hand during this process. It will help soften those little mishaps. Now, if you really mess up, grab a clean, soft brush, get it wet, and then just wipe the paint off with that wet brush. It's like a magic little eraser. So here I'm going to add some details under the beak, and you'll see me make a mistake here. As I put that stroke down, I realized that the paint wasn't flowing properly. So I added some more water, mixed it in with the paint, and then I went in again. Now this time it flowed a lot better, and I was able to start putting some feather details down. Again, the barbs are going to go multiple directions off the shaft, so it's not like fur that tends to have individual strands going in somewhat similar directions. Little did I know I was going to be directionally challenged on this painting, but hey, you live, you paint, and you learn. On the bottom part of the beak are some tiny feathers that I'm going to attempt to put in right now. Now I'm still working with the same brush and relatively the same color paint. I brightened it just a little as these feathers did stand out on the reference photo, and let me pop that up again for you to look at. I put down a single stroke that acts as the feather shaft, and then I paint some barbs off of that shaft or stroke. This is basically what I'll be doing throughout the rest of the painting. Now, sometimes the shaft is hard to see as most feathers overlay each other, so I just make up where it is in my head and I just kind of wing it with the barb-like strokes. Yes, pun intended. One thing I'm learning through this process is just how much patience matters. Painting feathers, especially when you're figuring it out as you go, takes time. But honestly, I don't mind it at all. There's something really rewarding about sticking with it, even when it feels tricky and complicated. Every little stroke feels like a step forward, and I know that with perseverance, it will all come together in the end. Just a reminder that art isn't about rushing to the finish line. It's about enjoying the journey, bumps and all. Now, I've kept the colors pretty limited in this piece, which helps everything feel cohesive and balanced. There will be some glazing and adding some shadows in later, and I believe I did that off camera, so my apologies. I do sometimes get carried away and forget to hit record. Well, it's a bit of a contrast to what I said in the past videos about not needing everything to be hyper detailed, but with the feathers, those tiny, almost endless million trillion strokes really do make a difference. They add a texture and a depth that brings the whole piece to life, and it's a lot of work, trust me, but there's something so satisfying about seeing all those small little details coming together. Now, going into this painting, I didn't have a clear plan, and honestly, I think that's been a great lesson for me. It's just a reminder that you don't always need everything mapped out to create something meaningful. Like for anyone out there who's a bit of a perfectionist, like me, this kind of approach might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's such a valuable learning curve. Letting go of rigid expectations just opens up room for creativity, exploration, and maybe some unexpected moments where things kind of just work out. So nearing the end of this painting session, I'm feeling pretty good about how it's coming together, even with some challenges along the way. Painting feathers has definitely been a learning experience, and I'm excited to keep exploring and improving with every stroke. Now, I haven't painted that many birds or feathers, so I hope that over time I'll get a whole lot better at it. Well, if you've been following along, I really hope this inspires you to try something new or tackle those details that you've been avoiding. If you're on a similar journey of figuring things out, I hope this inspired you to embrace the process and enjoy the unexpected and keep trying. So do let me know in the comments how you tackle tricky details like these, and if you'd like to see more of my learning moments. But until next time, keep painting and don't be afraid to wing it. Stay happy, keep your peace, and God bless you. Bye-bye.